Friday night, one beautiful day in Olathe, when possibly one of the worst injuries that can happen to a football player happened. James McGinnis suffered brain bleeding. He was walking off the field and collapsed. Not from a big hit. Not from a hit he delivered. He just collapsed. The former Olathe East Hawk's life would never again be the same. He was lucky to be alive, to be on the field again. One young man, however, was not as lucky. Andre Maloney of Shawnee Mission West suffered a stroke on the field during 2013. It was later discovered that he too had a brain clot. That brain clot ultimately killed him. Even with these local tragedies, every year, kids still come out for the sport they love, football. There are always risks involved with sports, but for football, the risk seems much higher. Here at Olathe North, we have an amazing training staff, filled with students in the sports medicine program. At the head of it all is Mr. Wayne Harmon. I ventured down to the training room to speak with him.
I am an NATA, or National Athletic Trainers Association, Board of Certified Athletic Trainer. I have been doing this for 33 years.
All right. What do you think about how concussions are handled these days, and do you think there's enough precautions in place?
A lot differently now because of all the concussions that were, or the concussion laws that were passed 5 years ago in the country, all across the country. There's now state protocol that says they have to be handled a certain way. Prior to that, in my 10 years previous to that here at Olathe North, we always treated them the same way. Mm-hmm. You were basically, if you were decided that you had a concussion, you sat for 5 days. Then you started back in, and a lot of kids would miss maybe a game, but they had that precaution that they sat for 5 days where they just really didn't do a lot. So we protected the brain from that standpoint. The rest of the state, the rest of the country has all had different protocols for that, but as of 5 years ago, when the states all started passing laws, you now have to be seen by a doctor or a osteopathic doctor to be returned to play if someone deems that you have a possible concussion. Whether it's proven or not is up to the doctors to tell you whether you're concussed. The officials, coaches, people in the stands can basically say, I think they're showing signs of concussion. Cole ran the opposite direction that he was supposed to when he intercepted that ball, so he might have a concussion.
Yeah.
So we have to look at those things. So we have a protocol in place where we do what's called a standard assessment of concussion. We do a post-concussion symptom scale, and we do what's called a balance error scoring system test. We do those 3 tests as our baselines, along with, if we decide that there's a good chance that you do have a concussion, we will go with an impact test, of which the football team this year, to a man, did baseline impact testing so that we can test them against themselves instead of a national norm.
Well, what is the return to play program? And do you think it's good for our athletes here at Olathe North?
The return to play protocol starts when the doctors have seen a return to baseline on the impact test. At that time, it's basically like it's a reconditioning program. Mm-hmm. For each week of inactivity, you lose 6 weeks of conditioning. So if you got a concussion the 3rd week of the season and you had 12 weeks of conditioning up to that, you lose 6 weeks of that conditioning in the 1st week of the downtime for the concussion. If the concussion takes 2, 3, 4 weeks, you lose a lot of downtime. So that return to play protocol starts out very simple, works up to the 5th day, which is almost a return to play, full practice, not a game, but allows the athlete to get a little bit better in shape so that they aren't at higher risk for another injury, whether it be a concussion or knee, ankle, shoulder, whatever it happens to be for them.
Do you think in baseball, there's obviously a lot of measures to save the arm with pitch counts, and a lot's been made recently about innings, and obviously in the major leagues. But in football, it's really just how many concussions do you have? Do you think there should be maybe a hit counter on a helmet? So if you get hit a certain amount of times and you can't practice the rest of the practice, or it's just walkthroughs the rest of the practice, or you can't practice the next day, what are your thoughts about that?
I don't think it would work. You have to have an awful lot of baseline telemetry to figure that out. There was a study done by Purdue 7 years ago where they put telemetry packages on players at a high school or several high schools in the Purdue area, and they started finding kids with concussions, and their predicted level of force that it would take to cause a concussion was at like 80 Gs, I think it was. And they were finding students that never approached the 80 G mark that were getting concussed. What they looked at is they looked at linemen, linebackers, and running backs as something you want to find out just what's going on. But you also have to understand each individual brain is different for each individual player. What one person may get after 5 or 6 hits, another person may take 200 hits and never reach that protocol or reach that level. It's really, really difficult to put an arbitrary state on that because there isn't enough background information to be able to say, person this size, this weight, this gender, this age will get a concussion at this point. There's just no way to study that. So what you're looking at is there's a lot of guesswork going into it. The best thing that's out there right now that works the best is making sure that there's a certified athletic trainer at each high school that works with those teams that is aware of each kid's idiosyncrasies, whether they are a 4.0 or a 2.0, whether they are have any other problems or conditions that will affect that. There are multiple conditions that will affect it. Whether or not you've got a sinus cold will affect whether or not you report symptomology for a concussion. So there's a lot of things that go into it. I think a telemetry package, I think Rydell makes one now, but the cost prohibitiveness is quite high. There's another one that has an indicator light that fits on the back of your helmet, and if you reach a certain programmed level of a blow, you're not supposed to practice anymore. Doesn't mean that you had a concussion. It just meant you hit that level. We could set everybody up at 1 G and the lights would be going off all day, or we could set them up at 90 Gs and they'd never go off. But somewhere in between there is where somebody's going to be if they get a concussion. And it may not be anything more than they're dehydrated, they're tired, they stayed up all night watching the 15-inning baseball game, came to practice the next day with very short sleep, didn't drink, didn't eat. They went out on the field and someone hit them just right and they're down on the ground now. Each individual has to be taken into and evaluated for it. So putting a telemetry level on everybody, I think, would be detrimental to a lot of people. Might help others, but it'd be detrimental, and it'd be probably a highly contested level as to, why is that level chosen versus this level, or what is the statistics between 15-year-old male football players having a concussion at this level as opposed to that level. So it'd really be a difficult, almost a arduous court battle kind of a case that would get it established, and then even then it probably would be argued.
Okay, so last question. What do you think hurts the brain more, repeated hits or just, that one hit that might, give you a concussion? What are your your thoughts on that?
I don't think, again, it goes back to each individual. It's not so much a hit. An A hit, a big, huge hit, is a big, huge hit. How many times have you had a big, huge hit in a game? They used to, up until about 3 years ago, they used to have Hit of the Week on ESPN every night. They've slowly decreased that because of the concussions. Now they're not showing it as often. It's not so much always a big hit. Like I was telling you about the Purdue study, it really showed that it wasn't a big hit that caused concussions. It was repeated small hits. I think a lot with the NFL protocol with youth football now, we're not having as much contact. I think that's great to a great extent. I think to a great extent, too, it also kind of holds back the game a little bit because there is less contact. And when you get into those big hits on the weekend, you're not quite as ready for them. North has a really big history of great defensive teams. And a lot of that is predicated on contact. And soft contact doesn't stop somebody from doing something, whereas hard contact tends to make you think twice about hitting that hole when linebacker A is coming through it and he's going to tattoo you. Is that right or is that wrong? It's football. So it's really kind of one of those deals that I think what the North football team is doing this year is different. There's a lot less full contact. It's just kind of the wave of the litigation nation that we're in right now. They don't want anybody to have full contact, so you don't have it. Statistically, girls soccer has higher concussion rates than football, but it doesn't get that much attention, whereas football is the national pastime and gets a whole lot of attention. I think there's something in the news right now that says there's been like 8 deaths in football this year. Were they all because of concussion? Possibly, possibly not. Was it because of some other underlying feature that is not being looked at? In my book, as long as I've been doing this, the health system has changed so much. Students don't go to the same doctor that their parents went to. And there isn't a health history that is compiled over the years. I think that has a tremendous amount to do with a lot of the things that are not being taken care of in football or in sports in general. You have kids that are dying of hypertrophic heart, but they go and see the cheapest physical. It may not be their normal doctor. It may be whoever was available that day that they could get it done, so they go out to practice, whether it be football, basketball, baseball, whatever sport it happens to be. And I think that's one of our big failures as a society is we don't have general practice doctors that we see all the time. And we really need to get back to where you go to the same doctor every year and you get the physical, and he has your health history, mom's health history, dad's health history, possibly grandparents on both sides. So you can look at a lot of those things and see what's going on so that you can look at a causative factors involved in possible injuries.
Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Hey, you're welcome, Cole.
Have a good rest of the day.
I'm going to try. You too.
This is just information, and football will always be played. One thing that should be on the front of everyone's mind is safety. Talking to Wayne and hearing stories definitely made me think, personally, about the sport that I love, but it didn't change how I felt. This is Cole. Have a great day, Eagles.